Hello dear listeners, welcome back to our YouTube channel Reddit Audio Tales. So let's start. Cheating wife's affair exposed by lawyer husband, who wins in court, takes revenge and vanishes. Be prepared served as the Boy Scouts motto. The Scout Code varied, outlining that a Boy Scout should embody traits like reliability, loyalty, helpfulness, friendliness, politeness, kindness, obedience, cheerfulness, thriftiness, bravery, cleanliness, and respectfulness. Surprisingly, it also mentioned naivety, apparent stupidity, idiocy, and trust. Nick had no alternative explanations. Typically, after checking his wife's iPhone email, he refrained from further exploration, a habit she knew well, thus forgoing extra security measures. Being a Boy Scout, he respected others' privacy. However, with Nick's wife departing in a few weeks, he struggled to recall her hotel's name despite her prior mention, hoping to avoid arguments about his inattentiveness, which had become more frequent. Their impending separation would be their longest since their wedding 5 years ago. Nick contemplated a romantic gesture, like sending flowers to express his affection while she was thousands of miles away in the city of love, Paris. Yet, he knew her affections in Paris would be for Dwayne, her companion on the trip. Upon entering his wife's phone password, their wedding date, Nick found himself perusing one of the non-work-related emails exchanged between Linda and Dwayne over recent weeks. They discuss romantic activities in Paris, including strolls along the Champs-Élysées, moonlit boat rides on the Sun, and passionate nights. Almost as startling as the affair itself was the fact that Linda and Dwayne exchanged messages using their work email accounts. They both should have exercised better judgment. Like Nick, Linda was a lawyer and Dwayne was a paralegal at her firm. All three had extensive experience in document analysis for major litigation cases, where teams of lawyers and paralegals combed through hundreds of thousands of emails for discovery proceedings. Typically, the narrative revolved around one or two individuals engaging in affairs, prompting lawyers to assess any impact on the case and strategize damage control. The truth was, Nick's lack of attention. When Linda mentioned the trip and hotel names stemmed from a sense of something amiss honed by his legal experience in detecting deception. He couldn't pinpoint it then, but his instinct signaled trouble. 5 years as a lawyer, listening to clients and colleagues had sharpened his perception. Something felt off when Linda first mentioned the trip. The arbitration process ahead promised to be dreadfully dull, leaving no time to enjoy the sights of Paris. She mentioned this casually, without even looking at him, and it felt too dismissive, knowing Paris held a special place in Nick's heart. They often discussed visiting together, since Linda had never been. Nick found her response odd, but he didn't anticipate such a dire situation. The email he was now reading felt like a sharp blow to his heart. Dwayne's message from the previous night suggested removing Nick to spend more time together without worry. Linda replied, stating she felt safe with Nick, but admitted to enjoying secret moments with Dwayne. This revelation stung. Nick felt uncertain about his next steps, aside from forwarding all correspondence to himself and printing out the email exchange as evidence, just in case. As an experienced lawyer, his first instinct was to preserve evidence. After securing the emails, Nick began to contemplate his options. He knew he needed to think carefully before taking any action. This analytical approach was what defined him as a lawyer. He was paid for his intellect, not his physical strength. With Linda out for a run and expected back soon, he had limited time to make decisions. Before he could consider his next move, he needed to complete the task of finding a hotel. However, this wasn't for sending flowers. He didn't understand why he needed this information, but he knew it was necessary. Perhaps to be near the Eiffel Tower, close to the International Chamber of Commerce, where Linda and Dwayne would be working on their arbitration case. Once he located a suitable Hotel. Nick quickly conducted a search on Virginia divorce law. While he remembered some details from the bar exam, he wanted to double-check. Infidelity was grounds for divorce and could impact issues such as alimony and property division. But there were nuances to consider. 1. Defense was if Linda discovered the infidelity and then resumed carnal relations voluntarily. Nick needed to leave the house quickly, avoiding confrontation for now, intending to confront Linda later with a carefully crafted response. He resolved to take control of the situation for the remainder of their marriage, even if it meant acting against the principles of the Boy Scouts. In wartime, as Churchill famously said, truth must be protected by a bodyguard of lies. Nick's lies would serve a greater purpose now, especially since none of them were under oath. He headed to the master bedroom, beginning to pack swiftly. Finishing promptly, he placed his suitcase near the front door. He nearly completed gathering vital documents, bank and credit card statements, 401k and IRA statements, car titles, pay stubs, mortgage, and Linda's recent student loan balance. As he emerged from his basement office, he heard her in the kitchen. Deciding to appear worn out and disheveled when facing his wife, with her shoulder-length brown hair pulled back into a ponytail, she looked attractive, though he found her repulsive. In his view, love was already dead. "I'll be going to Paris," he announced with a grim smile. Linda's face drained of color, her blue eyes losing their brightness. "What, Paris, Virginia?" Her initial shock faded quickly. "Sven just called," Nick explained. "We're needed for an insurance case and we need to prep a witness. We lost the motion to compel and the judge is furious, throwing the investigation timeline into chaos. I'll be on the road for a few weeks, though I might drop by occasionally." "Poor thing," Linda replied, with a fitting expression of concern. "Maybe your company is hiring." "I'd rather join you in Paris," Nick countered, noting concern flicker across her face again. But then she grinned. "Send me your resume, maybe you have the right experience for us to consider." It was a jest. Linda's law firm ranked higher than Nick's. Perhaps with some guilt she moved as if to hug him, but Nick retreated to his office before she could close the gap. Visions of striking her resurfaced, and he wasn't sure he could keep them at bay. Heading back upstairs, Linda inquired about his dinner preference. "I won't be able to stay. I'll grab something on my way out. Sven urgently needs me to hit the road," he said, bustling around the kitchen. Linda followed him to the door, a hint of concern in her expression as he grabbed his suitcases and headed out. She leaned in for a goodbye kiss. "Apologies. I think I may have caught a cold this morning. My throat feels sore. It could be allergies, but I don't want you to catch anything." Linda trailed him to the car as he loaded it. "When can I expect you back?" "Probably not until Friday. We're heading to Roanoke after Paris. Then the following week we're off to Baltimore." Perhaps growing more paranoid, he thought he could discern the gears turning in her mind as he watched her revert her gaze, as though contemplating how his absence might present unexpected opportunities for her. Waving goodbye, he reversed out of the driveway. He hoped she would simply assume that he was preoccupied with work and irritated by the Saturday call. His acting skills were already stretched thin, but he suspected she was already plotting to invite Dwayne over. Nick drove until he reached a nearby shopping center with a coffee shop. Like many lawyers, he found clarity in putting thoughts to paper. As he finished his coffee, he began jotting down a list of tasks. Posing for a moment, he realized he had never entertained the idea of reconciliation. That wasn't even on the table. Only retribution was. The question was, to what extent? The ringing of his phone interrupted him, not recognizing the number he answered impatiently. "Yes," he said, "Mr. Buford, I'm Sam Granger. Though we haven't met, I'll be direct." I found your number online. I specialize in buying old houses and replacing them with mansions. I understand it's controversial, but people tend to soften when presented with a check. Granger spoke rapidly, leaving Nick little time to react to accept a note that the house wasn't old, it was cozy. I'd like to purchase your house to demolish it, Granger continued. While I'd suggest a shopping center, construction timelines, especially with county permits, are unpredictable. I make my profit by closing deals fast, and I believe I can offer you a very favorable price. If you and your wife are interested in selling. Nick struggled to suppress a grin, reminiscent of the Grinches, as Linda had picked out their home shortly before their wedding. Although an aged ranch, it boasted a charming yard bordering a wooded area with a babbling creek. Despite its proximity to major highways, it offered seclusion and tranquility. What truly sold her was the treehouse in the yard opposite the master bedroom window, envisioning it as an ideal space for children. Meanwhile, Nick was drawn to its affordability and the fact that it was only a 20-minute drive from the main subway parking lot, coupled with a 30-minute train ride to work, making the move to the area highly convenient. Mr. Granger, I'll be absent for the next few days, so access to the property may not be guaranteed. Call me Sam. I don't require an interior inspection. As mentioned, it's a wreck, and I've already surveyed the exterior. Can we meet Sunday morning? Certainly. I'll likely finalize the deal using my wife's power of attorney due to her busy work schedule. No problem. I'll provide you with the necessary paperwork. Nick made a note of the address and started to envision the plan taking shape. Did Linda feel secure with her Boy Scout? Little did she know that Lord Batten Powell's scouting principles, stealth, cunning, and self-confidence, served as the basis for his boy movement skills akin to military intelligence tactics, including ambushes. She won't anticipate what unfolds until it's too late. But first, reconnaissance. To start, he set his empty coffee cup on the table and headed to the car for privacy. Dialing a number, he asked Frank, when the call was picked up. Frank Berry worked as a private detective. During his 5 years in corporate legal work, Nick also made it a priority to do pro bono work to assist disadvantaged individuals with their legal issues. This aligned with his beliefs about leading a meaningful life and provided him with courtroom experience that his regular job typically didn't offer. One of his law school peers suggested that Frank assist with a contentious divorce case involving a stepfather accused of carnally abusing his stepdaughter. Frank's evidence led to the man's release when the police's lackluster response failed, expediting the divorce process. As Nick briefed Frank on what he had uncovered, he queried, "You think your wife will bring him to our bed tonight? Is she truly that arrogant?" She's become incredibly arrogant. A standout in her law school class, she believes she's infallible. I'll handle it myself. I owe you for your help. The Rivera divorce case brought me significant positive attention. My phone hasn't stopped ringing, thanks Frank. Nick added, "Oh, and there's a treehouse in the backyard that you might find useful. Its windows directly face the master bedroom, and she tends to keep the curtains open. It used to bother me, but I've learned to accept whatever arouses her. You can access it by crossing the forest and jumping over the stream after dark. There are no fences or dogs around. A service road on the other side offers parking. Thank you. If it's okay, I plan to conceal a camera outdoors, aiming it at the front of the house to monitor arrivals and departures." Excellent. And you're engaging for a divorce, correct? You're seeking a divorce? Yes, and yes. All right, I know Harry's fondness for affidavits in the reporting process. If you're correct, we'll discover the truth soon. Next, Nick phoned Harry. Is this regarding the law school reunion, Nick? I've already received 5 calls about contributing to their fund. No, I need to retain your services. Linda's been unfaithful and I want to pursue legal action. After briefing him, Harry replied, "Come by tomorrow. Although it's Sunday, I still need to handle some paperwork at the office. We might as well proceed. It seems you've acknowledged that infidelity cannot be tolerated. Frank has already gathered compelling evidence of the affair. The challenge will be negotiating a fair financial settlement. She's also a lawyer at a prominent firm, so she'll have the means to contest and delay. Additionally, colleagues at her firm are advising her." "Leave it to me," Nick said. "I believe we can resolve this in a civilized manner, so you're not planning to go all out against her." "Understood, let's see what you propose." His final call required finesse. "Hello, Maggie, it's Nick." The silence on the other end was profound. "Maggie, it's good to hear from you too, honey, after all these years. What's on your mind, Nick? After all this time, I need your assistance." "I thought Linda was your assistant." "It's about Linda. She's been up to no good." "What a shock. I find it hard to believe foolish. Have you noticed that all of this is encapsulated in quotation marks? I can't offer you emotional or carnal support lately. I'm seeing someone else now, and I'm sure he's content. Look, I truly apologize. I regret that our indiscretions tainted our friendship. I also regret allowing Linda to push you out of my life when there was a chance for us to reconcile. But now I need your supportive assistance." "What do you need, Nick?" he informed her. There was a pause on the line followed by laughter. "I'm in," she said once she had composed herself, though he could still sense the grin in her voice. "You always knew how to make me laugh." "Thank you, Maggie. Once things settle down, you'll have to introduce me to Mr. Lucky, so I can commend him on his excellent choice and invite you both to dinner." "Consider it arranged," she replied. He required a place to lay low for a while and strategize. Thus, he booked a room at an extended stay hotel outside the Beltway in Fairfax, distant enough from his and Linda's usual hangouts to avoid detection. After settling in, he went out to grab a bite to eat. Although he wasn't particularly hungry, he knew he needed sustenance and his stomach to handle the drinks he intended to consume. Across the street from the hotel stood a restaurant named El Mariachi. As the hostess seated him in a booth, he noticed the bartender glancing in his direction. The bartender seemed vaguely familiar, but Nick dismissed the thought. At present, he had ample reasons to be concerned. The menu items suggested that the restaurant masqueraded as Mexican cuisine. Many Americans couldn't discern the distinction. He opted for budget-friendly tequila with the meal, anticipating a harsh hangover the next day, considering the discomfort part of the purging process. The waitress returned with a bottle of premium tequila from the top shelf. Catching Nick's gaze, she gestured to the bartender, who nodded in acknowledgement. Nick reciprocated the gesture and poured himself a generous drink as the bartender resumed tending to other patrons. It took a moment for Nick to recall his identity. He remembered him as one of the spectators at Rivera's divorce trial and the subsequent criminal proceedings, always seated alone in the back row. One day his client's daughter Sonia hugged him. But when Nick inquired about the man, Sonia grew silent, insisting he was just a family friend. Nick dined quietly, jotting notes on a notepad and sipping tequila. After the waitress cleared his table, he visited the restroom, feeling the surroundings sway as if he were aboard a ship. Leaning against the wall for support, he returned to his booth, attempting to maintain composure, only to find the bartender seated across from him. "I send your Nick," Good to see you, he greeted, clasping Nick's hand and shaking it vigorously. Nick settled in, awaiting his words. I never properly thanked you for helping my cousin deal with that scoundrel she was wedded to. Nick tried to downplay his role, but the bartender brushed it off. He was severely injured in prison, were you aware? I was. They fear he may never walk or eat solid food again. The bartender's slight smile sent a shiver down Nick's spine. I didn't catch that, Nick remarked. The bartender shrugged. Yesterday's news. What brings you to El Mariachi solo on a Saturday night? Where's your lovely wife? Nick met the bartender's gaze. The bartender maintained a smile, not mocking, but knowing. Nick wondered why he posed such an odd question. How did he even know Nick was married? Then Nick recalled Linda's surprise visit to one of the hearings, where she kissed him afterward. The bartender must have still been in the courtroom. We're dealing with some issues regarding her, Nick admitted. He saw no need to fabricate or conceal details such as her involvement with someone else. Again, he was met with the bartender's knowing smile. Nick was taken aback and, or fell silent. I'm no lawyer, Don Nicholas, but I know that if you want to keep a secret, you shouldn't write it down and leave the paper lying around, the bartender remarked, gesturing to Nick's notebook. It detailed aspects of infidelity, depicted drawings of Dwayne's hypothetical demise, featured the name Linda encircled with a slash and included a to-do list with the phrase burn the expletive. Nick shrugged, poor operational security, but at least it didn't expose any sensitive customer data. Any man in your predicament should ponder his desires. What do you truly desire, Senior Nick? Apart from wealth, what would be your ultimate vengeance? Nick didn't hesitate. I want to punch her nose so hard it shatters, and I want to strike her face until both her eyes blackened. She has a stunning face and expressive eyes. I want to obliterate them. The bartender's grin widened, followed by a chuckle and a shake of his head. My friend, your thinking isn't rational. Those who seek revenge so viciously often end up behind bars. You wouldn't want that. Unless of course it happens while you're visiting your clients, right? He paused, casting a sly glance at Nick, who nodded. But perhaps I can assist you with something. You aided my cousin with her predicament. She could have sought my help, but for various reasons she declined. Yet, you stepped in and handled it. Nick attempted to interject. Yes, he enlisted Frank to gather evidence, but he left the police to do the legwork. Nick also enlisted a partner from his firm, a former assistant United States attorney, to diplomatically liaise with a prosecutor to ensure proper handling of the criminal case. Nick accompanied his client to ensure she received due respect from the prosecutor. The divorce itself was standard procedure following her husband's conviction. The bartender waved off his objections. You must recognize that aiding everyday people like my cousin is commendable. On behalf of my family, I am indebted to you. I always repay my debts. I believe you could use some assistance. Nick studied him intently. I'm afraid I don't recall your name. The bartender's smile morphed into a shark-like grin. Some folks call me El Diablo. Devil. He nodded. That's what those who dislike me call me. To my friends, I'm Jose Garcia. Now it was Nick's moment to grin. What must I do to earn a favor from the devil, trade my soul? El Diablo's grin faded. Nick's expression turned serious. Let's be real. You're a lawyer. You don't have a soul. His grin returned, signaling a jest. Consider it professional courtesy. Senior Nick. Now, just provide me with your address, your wife's name, and her daily routine. Or what's your plan? I have a few ideas, but ever heard the saying ignorance is bliss? I think you need to remain blissfully unaware and keep track of your whereabouts over the coming months. Get yourself a disposable phone so we can stay connected. Leave the number here at the bar, and after that, steer clear of this place. It's for the best. Nick briefed El Diablo on hiring a private investigator, his intention to stay put until Linda jetted off to France, and her travel schedule. El Diablo recognized the hotel in Paris but kept its source under wraps. Just one query, Senior Nick. Is there any hope for reconciliation? Forgiveness, mercy? I don't want to hear I've had a change of heart later on. El Diablo met his gaze squarely. The grin vanished. His demeanor turned grave. Nick held his gaze, took a deep breath, and paused to rein in his emotions. The path ahead was clear. He was a man of simple values, prioritizing trust and loyalty above all else. They had left his marriage. Linda had flicked a switch in his mind, swapping love for loathing. With time and reflection, he knew he'd eventually become indifferent, but that time hadn't arrived yet. No one. El Diablo eased. All right, don't stress about a thing. The waitress delivered the bill. El Diablo waved her off but permitted Nick to tip generously. He also allowed Nick to take a bottle of tequila but cautioned him to pace himself. A clear mind was essential for the upcoming battle. Somehow Nick woke up on Sunday morning at a reasonable hour with minimal hangover. He reached Harry's law office at 10 a.m. and found Frank already present. Apologies, Nick, Frank said. She definitely had relations with that guy in your bed. He was there 2 hours after you called me and was still present when I departed this morning. We received high-quality footage. I'd made you a copy but you might not want to view it. Harry interjected. Or he probably shouldn't. Don't worry, Nick replied, accepting the DVD from Frank. Give me the summary. Frank continued. I climbed into that treehouse, just like you instructed, and they were all over each other. I captured clear shots of their faces, and frankly their entire bodies. It was evident they were engaging in relations. Nonetheless, it seems to be merely physical. They hardly conversed. I'm uncertain if this alters your plans. No. For how long? Nick inquired. They both had remarkable stamina. Thank you. This only makes me feel worse. Apologies anyway. I'm personally acquainted with Linda from your party last year, so I can identify her. We ran a check on this guy's license plates. They belong to Dwayne Martin. We know he's colluding with her. The duration of their involvement remains unclear, but it appears to be compelling evidence. Oh, and we've installed a camera and a nearby tree overlooking the driveway in garage, allowing us to monitor their comings and goings. I'll send you a remote link to the live stream on our secure server. I've discussed this with Harry and will draft a report and supporting affidavit for him to file. Once again, my apologies, dude. Frank exchanged handshakes with Harry and Nick before departing the office. So what's the plan? Inquired Harry. We're filing for divorce. On grounds of infidelity, but I don't want to serve her yet, Nick explained. Harry regarded Nick stoically. Trust me, Harry. Those words make my stomach churn. I don't want any foolish moves. I have a feeling things will go smoother than you think. Nick reassured. Harry winced. Just file this on Monday afternoon before the court office closes. Give me the case number and I'll handle the rest. But remember, Nick, I'm not versed in criminal law. Noted. And if you find yourself in trouble, I can't bail you out. You might be pleasantly surprised. Nick quipped as he exited. His next Destination was a meeting with Sam Granger. It proved highly productive. As Nick discovered, they could sell the house for over $100,000 more than the mortgage without real estate agent fees. Linda would be thrilled if she knew. Nick pledged to return promptly with the necessary paperwork to seal the deal. As Nick left Sam's office, he glanced at his phone, no messages or calls. She must still be occupied with Dwayne. Nick seized the moment to call his boss, Sven, and inform him of his urgent need for 2 weeks of vacation, or he would resign. Sven, in a panic, relented, recognizing Nick's vital role in current affairs and their temporary business slowdown. With his plan set in motion, Nick returned to his hotel to tend to his ongoing tasks. By Monday evening, everything was prepared. Linda had left voicemails on Sunday and Monday evenings, to which he chose not to respond, reserving his energy for Tuesday morning. Frank's camera, positioned outside the house, had provided Nick with insights. Dwayne had spent Monday night there, and based on his prior stay from Sunday evening to Monday morning, he would likely depart around 8 a.m. for work, just before Linda left around 8:30 a.m. At 7 sharp, Nick strolled through the front door and exclaimed, "Darling, I'm home." A sudden noise from upstairs caught his attention, and shortly after, Linda descended the stairs in her robe, appearing disheveled and startled. "Honey, what a surprise," she said, attempting to feign cheerfulness but struggling to conceal her unease on the brink of panic. "I thought you wouldn't be here until Friday. You didn't answer my calls." "Apologies," Nick replied cheerfully. "You know how it goes." He pretended not to notice the 2 glasses of wine left in the living room, as he made his way to the dining room. Linda lingered in the doorway, pondering her next move, and how to prevent him from ascending the stairs, where Dwayne was likely hiding. A knock at the door startled her. "Could you get that, honey?" Nick requested, meanwhile busying himself arranging papers on the dining room table, feigning obliviousness. As Linda squared her shoulders and went to answer the door, possibly anticipating the arrival of a bailiff with divorce papers, to her surprise, it was Maggie, who entered, unannounced, simply greeting them. Linda observed with intrigue as Maggie took a seat at the dining table and opened her suitcase. "Apologies, honey," Nick began, "but I'm uncertain when my next on-air appearance will be, and you know I can't imagine you embarking on a foreign trip without updating your powers of attorney. You know, just as a precaution in case any financial or medical emergencies arise. Oh, and I had a couple of moments over the weekend and received a tip about refinancing my mortgage at a fantastic rate. Since we'll both be traveling, I thought now would be the opportune time to handle it." "I apologized for the urgency," he added, attempting to convey his remorse. "Who's this?" Linda inquired, gesturing toward Maggie, once the pulsing in her temples had subsided. "This is Maggie," Nick clarified. Linda visibly relaxed. "Maggie is a notary," Nick elaborated. "You're my Boy Scout, always prepared," she remarked with a grin as she took a seat, though her eyes remained cautious. "It's just my nature, honey," he said, handing Linda a pen and arranging the papers in front of her. "The flags with arrows indicate where to sign. Feel free to review the documents if you wish." "I trust you," Linda replied with a broad smile, promptly signing all the papers before her. Nick silently prayed that she would comply, as his fate depended on it. But as they say, fortune favors the bold. As Linda signed each document, Nick passed them to Maggie, who notarized them. "Mrs. Buford, do you have a photo ID?" Maggie inquired. Linda rose from the table to retrieve her purse. A brief exchange of glances occurred between Maggie and Nick, both struggling to suppress laughter. Linda placed her driver's license on the table. Maggie snapped a photo with her phone and recorded the details in her notary journal. Linda offered coffee, but both Nick and Maggie politely declined. As Maggie finalized the certification of the documents in her ledger, and Nick organized everything into separate folders, Linda's gaze remained expectant, anticipating Nick's next move, strategizing her next steps. Maggie departed, tidying up her belongings and offering Nick a smile when Linda's attention was elsewhere. Seizing the moment, Nick informed Linda that he had a conference call to conduct, and retreated to his basement office to do so. Linda visibly relaxed, knowing she now had time to discreetly escort Dwayne out and erase any trace of him before Nick resurfaced from his sanctuary. Nick descended to the basement, allowing Linda to maintain the illusion that she was still deceiving him, pretending not to hear the heavy footsteps retreating up the stairs as Dwayne made his escape, or the garage door opening for Dwayne's departure. Nick continued with his charade. Dear listeners, this is first part of story. Next part will we upload later on this story. We hope you like this part and we will meet you in next part of this story.